My name is Vilma and I'm a knitter from Finland and I love colorwork knitting. And especially when autumn is starting to roll around, I'm really craving to get some colorwork projects on my needles. And even though I have done my autumn knitting plans, I have a separate video about that, I did want to make a dedicated video just for colorwork projects. And even though I'm not going to be knitting these sweaters this autumn myself, I want to share them if maybe you don't have your plans down yet, or you just want to look at some beautiful patterns and maybe add them on your favorites list for when it's time to pick up a new pattern. So I have compiled 10 colorwork sweater patterns, 2 cardigans and the rest are pullovers, and they are about half and half, like yokes and just details of colorwork, and then full-on all over colorwork patterns. So let's get started. The first pattern on my list is one of the 2 cardigans, and it is the Flora Yak by Wenkerold, and it's a cardigan with a colorwork yoke that has a sort of simplified floral motif. The cardigan is knit top down and it's knit using fingering weight yarn with 3 and 3.5 millimeter needles, so US 2.5 and 4 needles. The sizes for the cardigan range from XXS to 5XL, and the pattern is written in Norwegian. I would really encourage everyone to not be scared of patterns that are written in a language that you don't speak, because it's really not that difficult if you're not a super beginner knitter to translate a pattern. So if you're interested, if you think that a pattern is beautiful and you would really like it, but it's in a foreign language, I would really encourage you to just try it out anyway. And you can purchase this pattern for 79 Norwegian kroner, or about 7 euros on Ravelry. The second pattern is the Good Willow by Alison Cribbs, and this one is mostly a cabled sweater, and the colorwork is just a little sort of accent in the sweater. And this one is knit in the round, also top down, and it has a crew neck collar. This sweater is mainly knit using sport weight yarn, but the colorwork section can also be done with fingering held together with lace. So this pattern is really excellent for a stash busting project if you have just a tiny bit of like fingering weight hand-dyed yarn lying around. This is really great for using that up. And this sweater is knit with 4, 4.5 and 3.5 millimeter needles, which translates to US 6, 7 and 4. And it comes in the sizes from 95 to 178.5 centimeter bust measurement, or in inches 37.5 to 70.25 inches. And this pattern is written in English. and you can buy it on Ravelry for $12.55 US, which is about 11.90 in euros. The next pattern is a bit similar to the Good Willow in that in this one also the color work is just pretty much an accent, and the main part of the sweater is something completely different. But in this case, instead of cables, it's lace. And I am talking about the Olen by Mary Henderson. This one really caught my eye because I find the design really unique. I have really rarely see sweaters similar to this one, and it really reminds me of like folk costumes, but definitely in a more modern and casual way. This one is knit with lace weight yarn, and it's knit bottom up, and the needles recommended are 3.5, 3.25 and 2.75 millimeters, and in US needles 4, 3 and 2, and it comes in sizes 8 to 26, meaning a bust measurement of 32 inches to 50 inches, and this one costs £4 British, so about €5. The next pattern is the Arrow Sweater by Teti Lutsak. If you love knitting color work, I'm sure that you're familiar with her designs, but I wanted to pick this one because not only does the Arrow Sweater have really beautiful color work, but it also has interesting texture around the collar and around the sleeves. It's a circular yoke, which is knit top down, and it's knit with worsted weight yarn with 5 and 5.5 millimeters, or US 8 and 9 needles, and it comes in sizes 1 to 9, which means I'm looking for the actual measurement. Okay, so that means from 74 centimeters to 154 centimeters, or 29 to 61 inches of bust circumference. And yes, I think I also forgot to mention the Olen sweater is written in English, and this one is also written, the Arrow Sweater is also written in English. And this one you can buy for €8.80 on Ravelry. Okay, so it got so dark when I was filming that I had to stop, and now I'm continuing some days later, so let's keep going. The next pattern is Days of Beauty by Rachel Ilesley, and it's a colorwork yoke knit with fingering weight yarn. And what really drew me to this pattern is how delicate the colorwork looks. It really looks like jewelry. I don't know what colored yarn she used in her sample, but the color looks very heathered, very delicate. It has lots of different shades, but at the same time it looks very, how would I say, it's not too much. It still looks very very elegant. And the Days of Beauty is knit with 3.25 and 2.75 millimeter needles, or US 3 and 2, and it comes in 10 sizes, ranging from 86 to 172.5 centimeters of bust measurement, chest circumference, it's a better way to say it, or in inches from 34.5 to 69 inches. And the yarn that is recommended is just a 100% merino. She used yarn from Pigment and Ply, but yeah, 100% merino fingering. I'm sure you could use a bunch of different yarns and it would turn out pretty good. And this pattern is written in English, and you can buy it on Ravelry for a bit over £7, so a bit over €9. The next pattern is called Suomu by Laura Pajula and Liisa Saarenmaa, aka Neulosisko. So a knitting designer duo of two sisters. And Suomu is a Colourwork yoke sweater, and Suomu means scale in Finnish, so you can definitely see that they took inspiration from fish scales for the yoke. But I also think that the pattern does have this sort of jewelry-like appearance, and also it does have some similarities to more traditional Finnish colorwork patterns, but with a modern twist. And definitely this is something that you can play around with your color choices of how much contrast you want to have. That will also affect whether it looks more traditional or more modern. This pattern is knitted with Istex Let Lopi yarn, so it's Aran weight. I have never knit with Let Lopi. It's a bit intimidating for me because I have felt it in my hand and it is pretty scratchy. Well, it's known for being a very rustic yarn. So maybe that's something to consider. If you have more sensitive skin, you might want to pick a softer yarn. And it's knit with 3.5 and 4.5 millimeter needles, so US 4 and US 7. And the sizes range from XS to 3XL. And the pattern is written in English, Finnish and German. I have knit one pattern from Neulosisko in Finnish, and it was very well written and very clear. I can't really speak to the other translations, but at least the Finnish ones I would definitely trust. And this one is knit bottom up, so that is also maybe something to consider. I have heard that bottom up circular yoke sweaters can be a bit tricky, so to get all the measurements right, and so that the yoke isn't too shallow or too deep and things like that. So this is probably a pattern that you definitely do want to make a gauge swatch for. And finally, you can buy this pattern for €9.90 on Ravelry. Next, moving away from the yolks for a moment, next on my list I have Mustikkametsä by Jenna K. Mustikkametsä means blueberry forest in Finnish, and I really love the blueberry inspiration in this sweater, not only in, of course, the colorwork motif, but also with the colors, because at least to my eye it is clear that she has picked for her sample the sort of typical blueberry blue color for the colorwork, and then a more, how would I say, burgundy but leaning towards purple for the main color, which really reminds me of the actual inside and the flesh of the, well, actually not blueberry but bilberry, and the sort of color that you get when you mess around with the berries and you get the juice on your fingers. That is the color, the main color of the sweater, which I think is really clever and really pretty. I also really love the colorwork motif. So you have sort of the blueberries growing, this sort of very botanical motif, and then you also have it kind of looks like a ribbon to me on the bottom, and then also some other horizontal colorwork on the sleeves. It really fits her design aesthetic. I mean, Jenna K is the designer who has done the knitted Kalevala books, so I think it kind of fits into her aesthetic of maybe thinking about illustrations and poetry, and having this sort of horizontal stripe creates a sort of frame for the colorwork, which definitely reminds me of illustrations. The sweater also has sort of elbow length sleeves, and it looks to be a bit more cropped than usual, than some other times. It's a shorter rather than a longer sweater, which are things that I really like personally, because I think that sort of cut looks really nice with dresses and skirts. And Mustikkametsä is knit with fingering weight yarn. The suggested yarn is Vuonue Elsa, which is 100% wool, thin wool. I have never knit with that yarn, but I would imagine that probably switching around for a different, just 100% wool yarn would be fine. And the sweater is knit with 3mm or US 2.5 needles, and the sizes range from XS to 5XL, so at least it sounds pretty size inclusive. And this pattern is only written in Finnish, but once again I do want to encourage you, if you really like this sweater, just try it. You can always, you know, pop the text into Google Translate or something. Maybe not if this is your first sweater, but if you have already knitted a few sweaters in your own language, just changing the language really isn't that big of a curveball. You can definitely work around it. And you can purchase this pattern on Ravelry for 680 euros. Then moving on to even more sort of overall colorworks. Though I would say that Mustikkametsä was overall colorwork, since it has colorwork on the body and on the sleeves, but it was still still a bit more on the understated side, in my opinion. But the next one is really full-on color work. The next pattern is moving into even more all over color work, a more, how would I say, maximalist color work approach. And that pattern is called Nori for adults by Sophie Oshara. And this sweater really caught my eye with, first of all, the beautiful pattern. There's a lot going on without it looking too clustered, in my opinion. We have some geometrical shapes. We also have some more botanical, floral looking shapes. And I really like how in the sample the ribbing for the body is a different color from the main color, and it looks like the color work is sort of bleeding into the ribbing. I really like it. And I also really like how it still almost has a yoke kind of look, but the color work does continue on the body, but it ends on the sleeves. So you have some more of the main color on the sleeves, which sort of calms down the appearance of the sweater. And this one is knit with DK weight yarn. The suggested yarn is called Boucle Laine, which I have never knit with. It is a blend of, I don't know, Roussin. I think that is a type of wool. Like, is it a specific sheep in France? Maybe? Yes. So Roussin is a sheep that lives in Côte d'Armor in Brittany, France. Okay, so this is a very local yarn to France. Also the alpaca is living in France. So if you live in France, this sounds like a really lovely local yarn. For the rest of us, I don't know how easy it is to get a hold of this yarn. I've never heard of it before. So probably substituting for some other pretty rustic yarn would work just fine. And it is knit with 3.5 and 3 millimeter needles, so US 4 and 2.5. The sizes range from XS to 2XL, which is pretty decent. And it comes in a few different languages, in English, French and Korean. So yeah, for a pretty wide audience, I would imagine. And also there seems to be some different options for the neckline. The pattern is written for a turtleneck, but when you look through the projects, people have just also done a simple crew neck, which I would imagine is a pretty easy modification. And also this one, at least in the sample, looks like a more cropped sweater, which is something that I really like. And of course something that is very easy to modify if you want to make it shorter or longer. And Nori for adults is available on Ravelry for €10.04. The next pattern that I want to talk about is another full-on all-over color work sweater, called Camelia sweater by Sumin Kim. And this is another one of those, I would say, somewhere in between traditional and modern. With your own color choices, you can really influence on how it looks. If you choose more low contrast, soft colors, you will get a more modern look. And if you choose more high contrast colors, you will get a more traditional Fair Isle look. So this sweater, I really love this kind of variety and options that you have simply by changing around the colors. And I really like the pretty simple flower motifs of the Colourwork. I think it looks like something that I would have a lot of fun knitting. Something kind of mindful, but not too much. So you will probably learn the pattern pretty quickly. And what is interesting, so this is knit top down in the round, and it looks to have very clear raglan seams, though I'm not sure if that is really going on. But it really looks like it has raglan seams. And it has a pretty simple crew neck collar, which at least in the sample photos looks very well fitting. I don't know if this pattern has any short rows, or maybe it's just knitted longer in the back, but the shape looks very flattering and very thought out. Looks very promising to me. It's knit with sport weight yarn called Olen, and this is a mix of merino and angora fiber. So very interesting yarn. I have never knit with this one either, but it sounds really luxurious with the angora blend. I'm sure that it's a pleasure to knit with and an even bigger pleasure to wear, but I have no clue how accessible that yarn is. This is the first time I'm hearing about it, but I am intrigued. And for this one you need a few different needle sizes. You need 3.5, 4 and 3.75 millimeters, or US 4, 6 and 5. And this sweater comes in 4 sizes from 1 to 4. So let's see if I can find the measurements. Yeah, the listing on Ravelry is in many different languages, so I'm trying to navigate it. But okay, now I'm getting into the English. Let's see. No, I can't find anything about the actual size, like the actual circumference of these 4 sizes, so not really the most size inclusive, and I wish that there was even more information so that you would know before purchasing the pattern whether it's going to have your size or not. But this pattern also comes in 3 languages, so it's more inclusive on the language front. It comes in English, French and Korean. And this pattern is also available on Ravelry for €10 and 67 cents. Then for the last pattern of my list, we have the second cardigan of these patterns. And for this one, I picked a pattern by Mary Olen called Virginia. Now, Mary Olen as a designer definitely doesn't really need any highlighting. She is very well known, and especially for her colorwork patterns. But I wanted to choose the Virginia cardigan because I noticed that it only has 32 projects on Ravelry, so not really one of her most popular patterns, but I think it's a very beautiful and very autumnal cardigan design, so really perfect for right now. The Virginia cardigan is an all-over colorwork design. Very typical Mary Olen. You have a lot of going on, you have so many different colors, but at the same time it still looks cohesive and very elegant. The Virginia cardigan is knit bottom up. Is it in the round or It said that it's seamed. Okay, worked flat, yes. So you knit it flat in pieces and then seam it together, which I know for some knitters can sound really daunting, but personally I don't mind seaming, and I really like the structure that it gives to the garment. It's knit with DK weight yarn, Rowan felted tweed, which, if you're familiar with Mary Olen's designs, before she became independent, she was working mostly for Rowan, and the Rowan felted tweed seemed to be her go-to yarn, that for a lot of her designs it's always listed as the suggested yarn. Which, at least where I live, the Rowan felted tweed is pretty accessible yarn, and it's price-wise, it's not too bad, but it's not super affordable either. And this pattern is knit using 2.75 and 3.25 millimeter needles, so US 2 and 3, and the sizes range from S to XXL. So once again, not the worst with the sizing, but also not really the best. And maybe with this kind of all-over color work and knitted in pieces, if you wanted to modify the size to fit yourself, in my opinion, you would probably need some knitting experience to be able to do that, because you do have to do quite a lot of math with this construction if you need to modify the size. And this pattern is written in English, and you can get it either on Ravelry for £6 or €7.52, or it's also part of the Bloomsbury Collection 9 book by Mary Olen. So those were all of the patterns that I wanted to share with you, and honestly this gets me really excited to continue working on my own colorwork projects, but also definitely considering casting some of these on in the future. I would be really curious to hear what you thought of my picks for this video. If you have knit any of them, if you're interested in knitting any of them, if you have some other colorwork patterns to suggest. And yeah, happy knitting, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!